Lyasa Sirete. I'm the Roman Orthodox, but you can call me Roman or Magister Romanus. It's up to you. Take your pick. So here we are, live again. I've been trying to sort of figure out a way to start these off as we wait for people to come in and join the stream. And the best thing I can think of, because I'm going to start doing these on Sunday evenings, so hopefully that works out for everybody. The best thing that I have figured out to start these little episodes is to read a little bit from the readings from Divine Liturgy for the day. So I have at least marked in my Orthodox Study Bible, which I do use despite my review video. The readings for each week. So I believe this week is Matthew 4:18 through 22. So let's hear the gospel. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. He called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. And on this gospel reading for today, at least my priest reflected on the fact that the reason that these people were willing to follow Jesus at this very simple and direct call was because they were disciples of John the Baptist, and John the Baptist had done his job of preparing them to follow him. So anyway, that's sort of how I thought we might start today. As far as the actual topic that we're going to be talking about, I thought I'd kick things off by sharing a little bit of personal news. So, as you all know, I'm a new father. I just had a new baby daughter, and we are preparing eagerly for her baptism, for her Orthodox baptism. And we're also trying to raise funds so that we can have a very good reception afterwards. So be sure to check out the description to this video, where you can find a GoFundMe that is just there to support her baptism. But anyway, that isn't really where I wanted to start today. So we have the baptism, which is coming up. But in the Orthodox Church, we have a sort of a series of steps leading up to the baptism that perhaps many people don't know about. And I bring this topic up as being kind of relevant because recently, Metropolitan Saba, the Metropolitan of the Archdiocese of North America for the Antiochian jurisdiction, he recently did an interview with the Antiochian women where he talked about, various topics that were of interest to them. And one thing that they asked about was whether they still do the 40-day blessing, whether they still do the naming of the child on the 8th day. And indeed, it is still the custom in the Orthodox Church that a child receives his or her Christian name on the 8th day. And then later, on the 40th day, the mother is brought into the church along with the baby, who is then churched, who is brought up to the altar area, the iconostasis, and receives a blessing there for the mother, for the parents, for the child. And that's sort of a process. And all of that is leading up to baptism, which happens after the 40th day. Now, what I find really interesting about this as a former Catholic is that in the Catholic Church, the general, there is certainly a blessing in the in the Rituale Romanum, in the Roman ritual, for a mother after childbirth. This doesn't necessarily precede baptism, and it's not always done on the 40th day. So there is a blessing in the Roman rite for new mothers, and it sort of recalls the 40-day blessing or the churching, but it's kind of different because it doesn't necessarily precede baptism. And of course, baptism sometimes in the Orthodox Church precedes that 40-day blessing, depending on, if there are some, exigent circumstances, but usually it's afterwards. But certainly in the Catholic Church, the expectation would be that the baptism would happen sort of as soon as possible, as soon as the child could come to the church and be baptized. There's no sort of wait for that initial blessing. By the way, if you're in here and you're watching this stream, be sure to say hi in the comment box, and let us know if you're watching or if you're participating with us. As I said, we were talking about sort of recent events in my life, the birth of my new baby, and then what came next was her first and 8th day blessings. Now, traditionally, the priest would come to the hospital or to the place of birth pretty much the day after and would offer a blessing, especially to prepare her for her eventual baptism, or to pray for the child and for its mother. And then the 8th day blessing would, as the name implies, happen on the 8th day. Now, for us, it was a bit it would have been complicated to have a first day blessing, so we actually combined the 1st and the 8th day blessing together, and we gave our little baby a new Orthodox name, which is Matrona. So we named her Saint Matrona after Saint Matrona of Moscow, or Saint Matrona the Blind, because we relied on her intercession all through the pregnancy. That's not actually her legal name, but it seemed appropriate in any case, and we talked about it with the priest, and he said that would be okay, especially since we relied on Saint Matrona so much for her intercession during this pregnancy. So we had the 8th day blessing. It's not a very long blessing; it's fairly short, but it was wonderful, and it was, it was a true, shall we say, eye-opening experience to really feel the love of the church at that moment, as both the mother and the baby are recovering from their childbirth. So, to have the priest and the church present, even at that moment, I think was really meaningful. So that's sort of where we are on that. And as I said, we will have the baptism coming up after the 40-day blessing, or after the churching of the child. And with that baptism, of course, we'll have a big Greek Orthodox reception, and you can be a part of that by contributing on our GoFundMe, which will be in the description of this live stream. So that's just a little bit of background. As I was preparing for this live stream, I started thinking about similarities and differences between Catholicism and Orthodoxy as far as sort of beginning of life rituals, and they are fairly similar. There is a blessing for newborn infants. It doesn't really pertain to baptism all that much. I actually pulled up the rite here and read it, and it doesn't really mention baptism at all in the prayer blessing for newborn infants just after childbirth. So it's more sort of a general blessing for children because Jesus blessed children. And likewise, there's not a specific blessing, I don't believe, in the Rituale Romanum for the naming of the child on the 8th day. That's something sort of unique to Orthodoxy. And as I said, one of the interesting things is that oftentimes in the Catholic Church, baptism would happen very early on, hopefully within like a week or two. of the child being born. Whereas in Orthodoxy, there's not quite the, shall we say, rush or urgency to have the child baptized, because there is an understanding that, we don't necessarily think that they have to, be cleansed of original sin straight away to have the hope of, everlasting life. There's not really a limbo in mainstream Orthodox teaching. So, there's not this rush to have the child baptized as soon as possible, unless there, of course, is some danger of death or something along those lines. On the other hand, these sort of series of progressive steps leading to baptism, where the blessings are all directed towards this child eventually receiving illumination, that's something kind of unique to Orthodoxy, and certainly, at least in my review of the Rituale Romanum and the Western Rite and all of that, it's not really a part of that tradition. I also found it interesting as I was sort of researching baptismal practices. We all know I think the most obvious thing, or the most obvious difference, which is that children aren't generally confirmed in the Western Rite or in the Roman Rite. They're not generally confirmed right after baptism. That is something that usually comes later in life. And at the same time, of course, there's no Holy Communion for young infants. And I think most people know that difference, that Orthodox do baptism and then chrismation and then Holy Communion pretty much, one right after the other. Whereas Catholics separate them out. But something else that I found interesting was just the structure of the rite. So in the traditional form of baptism, baptism takes very much the form of a blessing. So you have the initial prayers, the initial verses, and then you have a prayer blessing over the water, and then you have the prayer blessing over the child, and then you have the baptism, and that's pretty much it. There are, of course, some initial rites, the exorcisms and so forth, that are common to both East and West in preparation for baptism. Different words, but same basic concept. So you have exorcisms, blessing of water, etc. But it's all very much structured as a blessing. Now, when this was updated with the Novus Ordo, they added in a whole bunch of other stuff, and they sort of reordered things. I think they also reduced the number of exorcisms down. But they added in a part for scripture readings and a homily, actually. Whereas in the Orthodox form of baptism, as far as I can tell, there have always been readings from scripture that were a part of the baptismal rite. So I don't know if that's something that they borrowed from the East, or if it's just sort of where they tried to standardize the structure of blessings to have, certain elements, including readings from the Bible. But, there's whether it's a coincidental similarity or just a random similarity, I don't know, but that is a similarity between the Novus Ordo and the Eastern rites. That is not true between the traditional Latin rite form. So anyway, I found that kind of interesting that, the two rites have, kind of inched towards one another in one sense. And like I said, I think having later baptisms is becoming a bit more common in the Catholic Church. Even though it doesn't really match with their theology, it's sort of becoming more common, but certainly not common amongst traditionalist communities. So anyway, that's just a sort of my thoughts on the differences between Catholics and traditionalist Catholics, modern Catholics, and Orthodox on beginning of life ceremonies. I want to be sure to leave a lot of time for open discussions and open-ended questions. Hopefully you've all seen my latest 2 videos about how to make an Orthodox Christian, go out and have babies. That's the most surefire way. And on the other hand, my other video on my other video that covers. Gosh, it just the whole topic just popped out of my head. Leaving Eastern Orthodoxy, yes, and so on the subject of why people leave Eastern Orthodoxy. So hopefully you've had some time to watch those other two videos. I was really pleased with how many people viewed the last one and how many positive comments I got, and that we had some pretty good debate on those topics. But at this point, I see that we've got about 3 people. Just to review what I've been talking about so far, I was talking about the birth of my new child, of my new baby daughter, the fact that we had the first day blessing, the 8th day blessing, which is, a very unique ritual to Eastern Orthodoxy, and we're preparing for the baptism. And then I talked a little bit about the differences. So hopefully you can go back and watch that part of the stream. But did any of you have any questions about those videos, or just about converting from traditionalist Catholicism in general, or maybe thoughts on the channel? I mean, I'm open to any of that as we go ahead on this. Be sure to say hi in the comment box if you're dropping in. Let's see here. Hi, Patrick. Welcome in. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for dropping by. So I'm open to any questions. If I don't get any questions, though, I'm also going to be looking through the comments on previous videos and kind of talking about my responses to that. Let me see here. Pull those up. Okay, so a few that a few that especially, and I'm going to put these in the comment box. Someone said this on my last video, which I thought was really interesting. The comment went, church shoppers always eventually keep shopping wherever they land at the moment. It's a problem with Protestantism having so many denominations and so many doctrines. I used to be Protestant for 40 years. I need the theosis that Orthodoxy teaches. Other churches are lacking on that point. So that was a comment on the previous video, that church shoppers always keep shopping wherever they land. And I really hope that's not true for most people. But I'm afraid that, it kind of does prove true. People that sort of are always looking around for new churches and for new religious experiences, they do have a tendency to sort of keep shopping. And Orthodoxy isn't one of those things that you can just consume, I don't believe. Let's see. I got a comment here. Let me put, Patrick, I'm going to put this up on the screen. My understanding is that it is common for converts to go through a honeymoon period. When that ends, practicing Orthodoxy and sticking to it can become a real struggle. And I agree with that. I don't think it's a spiritual phenomenon at all. I think that is purely a human social phenomenon. Because here's the thing. I also converted to Catholicism from Protestantism. And absolutely, there was like a 9-year honeymoon period where I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I got to 10 years and I was just like, yeah, I'm Catholic, but do I really care that much? There were certainly moments where I didn't feel all that connected to the church. And even actually like 2 or 3 years on, it was difficult to maintain the same level of fervor as in the beginning. And what I think that means, at least my observation, is that you can't take that initial fervor as like proof of anything, right? You have to take you have to consistently, especially at the beginning, consistently work and try to seek out new experiences in the Orthodox Church, and try to challenge your own notions about what the Orthodox Church is, just to fight that. At least that's my humble two-year opinion. The thing that helped me the most after I converted, and I don't know, I'm probably still in the honeymoon period, but one of the things that happened to me is I straight away got hooked in with a cradle Orthodox family, and that really showed me the depth and the richness of the Orthodox Church. Something more than what you just have during the honeymoon period of conversion. Thanks for the comment, Patrick. Okay. Let's see. Another comment, and this one I didn't really know how to respond to, and I'm just going to read this aloud. Hopefully you all read this. Well, actually, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long, but it is a comment from a Swedish-born Orthodox convert who really is struggling, apparently, to stay in the Orthodox faith. And his or her experience is that, first of all, that the Orthodox Church seems to be, seems to be falling apart because there's no single jurisdiction to keep everybody sort of on the same page. And also, sort of reflecting on his or her frustrations with the Orthodox Church in Sweden, because all of the Orthodox churches sort of use non-local languages. So, for example, the Orthodox Church down the street uses Church Slavonic, or not down the street. The Orthodox Church down the street is a Greek Orthodox Church, and they use Greek. And then the jurisdiction that they were in used Church Slavonic, and there was never really any attempt to use Swedish, the local language, except in his or her particular parish, and then talks about sort of the struggle of transferring that parish into the Antiochian jurisdiction. And this reflects what I'm hearing a lot of people like being frustrated about with Orthodoxy. They sort of come in and they expect it to cater towards their nationality just because, that's what they need or what they think they need. And I do kind of want to talk about it because the comment also talks about how their children go to church and don't seem to understand anything, and how this is a problem for Orthodox children all the time, especially when they go to churches that primarily celebrate in a language other than the mother tongue. And the commenter also said, well, this is really difficult because because having it in a language that I don't understand. I'm not a language expert, so I'm not going to learn this language, etc. So I feel like uniquely qualified to talk about this whole experience and what you can do about it. And the only reason I'm saying that I feel like uniquely qualified to talk about this is because I am a former traditionalist Catholic and very used to going to church in a completely different language, that is in ancient, in Latin rather than in English. Of course, the sermon was generally in English, but not always, right? We would go to, Latin Mass churches with a foreign priest, and so sometimes there'd be no homily at all, or sometimes it would be in a foreign language that you didn't understand, but it didn't matter because the Mass was in Latin wherever one went. So as far as that goes, one of the best things that you can start doing is really reading and picking up copies of the Divine Liturgy translations and sort of putting those in your mind so that no matter what language you go to, you know the structure of what is happening from the ritual, not just the words that are being spoken, not just going to Divine Liturgy be a spoken experience, but a total sensory experience and you know what's going on, basically, because you've already studied the divine liturgy and the text behind it. As far as the translations of the individual texts, there are many options. GoArch has the digital chat and stand in English. Many jurisdictions have online translations of the Bible text, so you can always sort of print those out and stick them in your divine liturgy book or stick them in your prayer book and bring them with you, and follow along that way. And you get, I think, pretty close to just as much out of it. And of course, it's possible to learn the hymns and the prayers in the original language, perfectly understanding what they mean, even if you don't, have all of the grammar and vocabulary and so forth of the language that the liturgy is in. So, especially with children, it might surprise you, but they get this skill like very easily. You say, oh, well, at worship, because we go to a Russian Orthodox church and they still use Slavonic, we need to know what's going on in the liturgy. And so here's what happens when, here's what these words mean. Here are a few, hymns that we sing, and here's what those mean. And it can be a very teachable moment. So I'm not saying that that's the ideal situation at all. I don't know that ideally everything is in the native language or the vernacular language. I don't necessarily think that's the case. But I do think that even if the liturgy is in another language, you can still get a lot out of it. And in fact, you can get certain things out of it that maybe you couldn't get otherwise. So, pick up a good copy of the Divine Liturgy in your own language, bring it with you to church, print off the readings if your prayer book doesn't have the readings already included. I do have a prayer book that has all the citations to the readings included, the Ukrainian Orthodox prayer book, which I think is really neat. So you can also read those ahead of time before you go. And then you get sort of some additional preparation and spiritual experience doing that. So, all I'm sort of trying to say here is that people have been managing that issue for some time, and it doesn't always result in the children just being hopelessly confused. Children pick up on the attitude of their parents, and if you're trying and you're working constructively to understand what's going on, it's not going to be a problem. I'm not saying it's not, an issue. I'm not saying that that necessarily doing things in ancient languages or doing things in foreign languages is the best situation, but I'm saying you can get past it, right? You can work with it. And if you do so, I think you'll be blessed and you'll learn something new. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Someone else said on the last video, I believe this was the last video, leaving Eastern Orthodoxy. Someone said, the ethnocentrism is my biggest gripe as an Orthodox convert, along with the ecumenism, which is why I left the Rome/SSPX position. And I agree with you. I agree you need to live Orthodoxy to understand the Fathers. I've been reading the Latin Fathers and have been pleasantly surprised how well they complement Orthodoxy. I think that is a fair point, right? The Latin Fathers definitely do well. They were Orthodox, so, or at least most of them were. Before 1100. So, the Latin Fathers do, in fact, reflect Orthodoxy fairly well. It has really given me a better understanding, particularly how well the dogma of uncreated grace or operations answer the Pelagian heresy. I would love to hear more about that. How it answers the Pelagian heresy. That would be a really interesting topic. I will definitely say that ethnocentrism can be a problem, but it doesn't have to be your problem. Okay, everybody following me here? It is a problem, ethnocentrism, right? If you go to a church and they're more concerned about being Greek than about being Christian or Orthodox, then that is a problem, right? But does it have to be your problem? Do you have to make it? Does that have to get in the way of you going to divine liturgy and worshiping God in spirit and truth? I don't know that it does, right? It's something I think one can work around. Just a thought out there, right? There's a difference between things being a problem and you making things your problem. And also making things your problem to solve. Right? Thinking that you're going to somehow rescue the Orthodox Church. That's not why you convert or how you convert. Let's see. What other comments do I find interesting? Someone talked about the Greek Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese being the worst jurisdiction. Come on. I don't think that's true. I don't think there is a worst jurisdiction, because if they're a jurisdiction at all, they are an Orthodox one, and that makes them way better than the alternative. I suppose the worst jurisdictions are the ones that are not canonical. Anyway, what else do we have? Someone talking about the Western mindset. I've talked about this on a video before. I don't really think that like hyper rationalism or what did this guy? He had something else that he was adding. The intellectual experience of the church rather than the mystical experience. Is that a Western mindset? I don't know that that's a Western mindset, because it was part of the Eastern Orthodox experience for years, that there was a sort of intellectual, a very, mental, intellectual concept of the faith for many years that held sway in many parts of the Orthodox Church. Was it correct or the best? Well, probably not, but it nonetheless was not particularly Western or Eastern. It just, in both churches, it was something that happened. Just as in the West, there are mystical writers, right? There is a Western mysticism. So I don't know. Is there such thing as a Western mindset? You tell me in the comments if you think there is a truly Western mindset. I don't think that a lot of what is called a Western mindset is really all that Western. I think it's just a bad mindset. That's not that isn't true to reality. Okay. Be sure to jump in the comments if you have any questions or discussion of the things that I've been going through so far. Definitely good to see a lot of people popping in and out. I did have one comment where, I mentioned in my last video the Antiochians, the OCA, and ROCOR, and then they said, well, so everyone but the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, and I pointed out, there are a lot of jurisdictions in America. Sadly, there, rather than being a unified church, we do have a lot of overlapping jurisdictions, and those include, the Greeks, the Serbians, the Romanians, the Ukrainians, the Bulgarians, the OCA, the Antiochians, the it goes on. The Carpatho-Russians. I'm trying to think if I missed any. Did I say Macedonians? They're in there. There's a Albanians. Is there an Albanian Orthodox Church in America? I don't know. But there are a lot of Orthodox jurisdictions in America, and they're all unique. And the good thing is they're all Orthodox. So be sure to go check one of them out. If you are a convert, go to your nearest Orthodox church, and don't worry about what it says on the sign. Actually, I was in a meeting with some other Orthodox attorneys, and I suppose now is the best time ever for me to say never take anything that I say as legal advice. but I am an attorney in my day life. So I was in a meeting with other Orthodox attorneys, and someone said, "Well, I make a point of never going to an Orthodox church that has an ethnicity, right, a nationality attached in front of Orthodox. I never go to a church that says Greek Orthodox Church or Antiochian Orthodox Church or what have you." And I thought, well, that's really sad. Well, don't hold it against a church just because they have a particular national background. Like, that might be the best church in town. Instead, if you're a convert, go to your nearest canonical Orthodox church and check them out, and of course, if you can't stay and you have to go to a different one, well, then you do. But nonetheless, it seems odd to me to be so picky about what an Orthodox church puts on its sign, unless it puts on the sign, "We don't believe in the Trinity here," or something like that. Well, might want to move on, or if it indicates that it's not Orthodox. We got 3 people in, so like I've been talking about, be sure to put your comments and questions in the chat box, in the comment box. Let's see. Patrick, the local Antiochian parish I attend had a very nice mix of cradle Orthodox from many different ethnic backgrounds. For example, has a very nice mix. Romanians, Macedonians, Russian, Ukrainian, Greek, etc. I absolutely agree. So my town, not my wife's hometown, but my hometown has, it's not technically in the same town. They're just right across the city line from one another. But there is one Orthodox church that is an Antiochian Orthodox church. And there's another one that is a Rokor church, so a Russian Orthodox church. And what I find funny is that the Antiochian church, which is the bigger church, has a ton of Russians that go to that church because it's a little bigger church, I think. It has more people. It has a good, religious education program. Maybe they like the priest or they like the music, what have you. They all go to the Antiochian church, except on old calendar holidays that are really big for them. Then they hop on over to the Russian Orthodox church and they go for the old calendar holidays. So, that's just kind of a funny thing that I think happens, that oftentimes the Antiochian church may draw in people from a whole bunch of ethnic backgrounds, and then they go back to their particular ethnic jurisdiction for big holidays or for specific events. I know in my wife's hometown, there's a Serbian Orthodox church, and that seems to happen there too, where a lot of the people that go to the Serbian Orthodox church will go to the Antiochian one for everything except for the big Serbian feast days and so forth. So, that is just part of the reality of our church. And I have heard that there are that sometimes people who aren't that conversant in their national language, like, for example, if they have, grew up speaking a little bit of Greek in the home, but they don't really know church Greek, that they will prefer to go to an English-speaking church because they know English, or they studied English more than they studied church Greek, and the same for Serbian and so on and so forth. That they'll go to an English church even though that's not their native language, but it's a language that they learned really well. So maybe English is sort of starting to take on this role as an international Latin, which makes me, a former Latin teacher, very sad. But nonetheless, it's probably something that is really happening. Let's see. Here. Any other comments from my last video? I always get a comment mentioning the Western Rite. For some reason, people seem kind of fascinated by my view on the Western Rite. Guys, I'm not going to lie to you. I have attended a Western Rite church twice. It was my first experience in the Orthodox Church. I was when I converted from traditionalist Catholicism, the Western Rite was my first stop because I thought, oh well, I really know all what's going to be, sort of going on here. For me, it was just too painful, and there's just so much richness to the Eastern Rite. It's not. You don't have to be Eastern to appreciate the traditional Byzantine Rite of our church. There's nothing, there's nothing Eastern about it, right? Just as with the Latin Rite, which has spread all over the world, you don't have to be a particular, culture to appreciate a traditional Latin Mass. So, I don't know. It seems to me like claiming that if you're a Western person, the Western Rite is really going to speak to you. Well, that's not true, especially if the Western Rite is being performed, not performed, but is being said and worshipped in the way that it authentically was at the time of the schism or before. And certainly if it's picking up how the Latin Rite existed, prior to the Vatican II reforms, that's just as alien to a Baptist as the Byzantine Rite, just personally speaking. So I don't know. I think I'm perfectly happy with the Byzantine Rite. Let's see here. And of course, someone always seems to pop into one of my videos and says, just be Greek Catholic. Can I get a collective LOL in the comment box to that? Just be Greek Catholic. Yeah, it's just not going to happen, guys. No matter how many times you comment on my video, just be Greek Catholic. I'm not going to be Greek Catholic because I'd rather, if I'm going to be attending the Eastern Rite and worshiping like an Orthodox person, I want all the Orthodox saints. I want the Orthodox theology. I want the Orthodox ecclesiology. I don't want to be halfway of anything, especially halfway Orthodox. Let's see. Someone said, in a shopping phase right now, due to a mix-up and same addresses, attended both an Eastern Rite Byzantine Catholic liturgy and a Western Rite Rokor liturgy today. Wow. That's a very confused Sunday. I'm not going to lie. That is quite a Sunday, or quite a weekend. Eric, let me put that up there. That is quite a weekend. But praise God, you went to church, right? And worshipped Him, and I do find that okay, so story about like similar names. So in the Orthodox Church on most Sundays, you at the beginning there are a series of proper chants called they can be called a number of things, but generally they're called troparia and kontakia. Sometimes they're called dismissal hymns or apolotikia and colex, kontakia, or tropars and kondoks. Sometimes they're called that if they're in the Slavic tradition. And generally speaking, in that rite, in the Eastern Rite, you sing a troparion or a apolotikion to the saint or the mystery that the temple, that the church is dedicated to. So that'll come, after sort of the propers of the day. So often what I find kind of fun and confusing is when I go to a church in a different jurisdiction that has the same name as the one that I attend in my hometown. And, they'll start singing our Troparion, the one that we sing every Sunday. And I'll think, I can sing along. And then you realize the translation is slightly different and the melodic structure has been slightly altered, or we've slightly altered it either way. And so we're slightly off. And so you end up, singing through a rest or making quite a mistake. Okay, let me see what I've got here. Have you read Matthew Thomas's paper on justification or his video with gospel simplicity? What do you think? What do you think of the thought of two levels of agency, that God justifies 100%, yet we can also add to our, and I'm not sure, add to our justification on the secondary plane? I am not going to lie, I haven't watched that, so I don't really know what his position is on justification. I know that as a former sort of medieval philosophy of religion guy, that the distinction between justification and sanctification is not really that big of a thing in Orthodoxy. So I would refer you more to someone who, is more of an expert. But, if we think of sanctification, as it's often referred to in Protestant theology, as being the theosis of Eastern theology, or rather the theosis of Eastern theology being sanctification, which I think is a pretty good equivalency. There's no difference between that and justification, because, whether or not we are going to live forever with God and whether or not we are going to enjoy bliss forever with Him is, dependent on our theosis. So, not our, being found righteous or being declared righteous, as is the case in Protestant theology. So I think there's, so I don't really know, what I would add to that, justification versus sanctification, or, how justification works in that particular instance. Not really, as I said, I'm not really a theologian. I don't really have authority to speak on those types of things, but that's my thinking. If you were going to look up how an Eastern Orthodox theologian would try to answer that question, they would probably be confused about the idea of distinguishing between justification and sanctification. That's just my suggestion. So you would have to look up some materials on all that. What does Roman Orthodox mean? Thank you for asking this question. Great question. Why the Roman Orthodox? Okay, well, one aspect of that is, of course, I'm a Latin speaker, so I was a Latin teacher for years, and so I speak Latin. I read it pretty much fluently. And so, I'm always going to be a Roman in that sense, right? Part of the Roman tradition. But part of the whole, we might say, ideology of this channel is the idea that Orthodoxy is Roman, right? If you think of, Constantinople was not the capital of the Greek Empire. It was the capital of the Roman Empire. And so Orthodoxy is, in a sense, Roman. And this even comes out in local languages. So I'm Antiochian Orthodox, but you don't call it Antiochian Orthodox in Antioch or in Antakya or in Syria, right? You call it Rum Orthodox, which Rum, of course, comes from Roman, referring to the Eastern Roman Empire centered on Constantinople. So it's sort of a play on words, right? Roman Orthodox, pointing out that we're all part of this greater Roman tradition. It's just sort of different expressions of it in the East and West. And of course, the fact that I'm a Latin speaker who's now gone over to Constantinople, if I do say so myself, rather walking the path of the Holy Saint Constantine before me, right? Just joking, right? I'm not that caught up on myself. But, it's sort of a play on words as far as that goes. This sort of, what is Roman? Let's see. I hope that makes sense, Michael. Someone else said, leaving Orthodoxy. No, I'm not leaving Orthodoxy, but my video is about people who have. So go check out that video. I sort of give my take on all of these channels. It seems like a rash of Protestant ministers who were Protestant ministers, discovered the Orthodox Church, dragged themselves and their whole families into the Orthodox Church, and then found out something that the Orthodox believe that they don't like, and now they've popped out and they've gone back to their original churches, or they've gone to a different Protestant church, or they've shopped around and finally found a Protestant church that would take them. In fact, in many cases, continuing to be ministers in some capacity. So my video kind of deals with that, kind of talking about what it seems is in common in all of those videos, and what I observed just from an editorial perspective. No, I have no intention of leaving Orthodoxy. For one thing, because my wife told me that if I left Orthodoxy, she was leaving me. Which, if you think about it, one of the sad parts of a lot of these stories of conversion is that, it seems like the spouses and the children are just sort of dragged with the father from church to church to church to church as he discovers new things or finds out something about theology. And I'm always sitting there like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I was told in no certain terms that if I left the Orthodox Church, I was leaving my wife. And thank God for that. Right? It's always good to have a good anchor, I think. And I hope that we all sort of are, whether we're Orthodox or Catholic or whatever, that we all believe what we believe strongly enough that would be our position. Imagine a time when church, I'm going to put that up. Imagine a time when church shopping wasn't really a thing or even possible. Thank you for saying that, because I think that is very true. I was raised in an area that was predominantly Southern Baptist, and it, in a lot of ways, the Southern Baptist denomination of churches and the kind of church that I grew up in was merely a reflection of the culture that we were in, down to the fact that, how we conducted our meetings was, by Robert's rules. That's how we even voted people into the church. As you made a motion in a second to receive someone into the church. These two things were really reflections of each other. To discover Catholicism, I actually left my hometown. I'd already sort of been looking into it, but I had left my hometown, and I suddenly was in a place where I could be surrounded by it. And likewise, when I left Catholicism, I was very fortunate shortly after deciding to visit an Orthodox church to join and to become connected with an Orthodox family. I realize that journey is fairly unique and that not everyone has that opportunity. But we have to admit that if you are speaking historically about Christianity, when you left a church, you were leaving an aspect of your culture behind, right? Certain parts of it would stay. Certain parts of your culture, if you succeeded in converting a whole bunch of them, would be held over. But there is an element of switching churches. Switching churches meant switching an aspect of culture. Let's see. The idea is that before Luther taking Occam's simplicity, the church had no problem with God working 100% and us working 100%, we working 100%. If there's only one plane, all the justification problems arise. It's probably, you might like the interview on gospel simplicity, maybe a way to understand Orthodoxy's ability to deal with paradox. Yeah, I'll check it out. Sounds like a neat video. I do watch Gospel Simplicity a lot. I did a plug on one of his recent videos, which I found really interesting, where he talked about why conversion is not just about following the evidence. And I thought his take was really profound. Not that others haven't said it or that it's not, a fairly commonly known thing, but it is accurate. You simply cannot, as a single person, know everything about the church. You can't. You can't even know all of the reliable evidence about the church or about Jesus Christ. And in any case, making fundamentally that the church is making historical claims about Jesus and about the church. And history is really complicated, right? Evidence for history and determining what probably happened is a really complicated process and involves value judgments. So it's not the case that you can simply follow the evidence. You also have to make value judgments as to how to sort through the evidence and which fathers you're going to take and which ones you're not, and which quotes are going to be the most trustworthy and probative. In the same way as if you have a jury trial, 9 times out of 10, the answer isn't just right in front of your face. And by the way, if you think an eyewitness is the perfect evidence, right? Boy, you need to read a little bit on the research on that. Like, eyewitness evidence is some of the worst evidence, in fact, because our eyes do deceive us. And people get false impressions and false memories all the time. So I thought that was a really good video of his. I think I did a plug for it on the community feed. So by the way, if you're here and you haven't checked out the community feed or responded or commented on that, be sure to do that. Check out all my posts, comment on things whenever I say them. You can also check out my Twitter, the Roman Orthodox on Twitter. I don't use it very often, but sometimes I'll put my random thoughts on there. So be sure to follow that and check that out. I might get a little bit more, spicy on that platform than I do on YouTube. But anyway, you might check that out. All right. We've just got a few more minutes. I'm not going to stay on here too long because my wife is downstairs with my newborn baby, and I want to go and spend some time with them before bed. But last little bit, how many of you share in the comment box what are some topics that you all would like me to cover? So things that you would like to see in videos that I haven't got to yet. I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. So if you're just joining us, I was saying, put in the comment box if there are any topics that you would like me to cover in future videos. And I'll be sure to do that, or attempt to do that. Let's see. Do we have any takers? Well, be sure to reach out. I have my email on the channel now, so be sure to email me if you have any thoughts. And as I said at the beginning of this live stream, be sure to check out the GoFundMe to support my newborn baby's Orthodox baptism. It's just a way that I can prove to my wife that this time spent away from her and from the newborn is somehow worth it. So if you want to join in, praying for us, supporting us as brand new parents, please feel free to do that on the GoFundMe. I'll put a link to that, or actually there is a link to that in the community page, and I may put a link to that in the description of this video. So thank you all very much for joining, and I'll say to all of you, as I always do, Kalispera, Efcharistopoli. Have a very good evening, and thank you all very much. Bye. Adiosas.